Hello everyone, I'm Art Fennell. Thanks for joining us for the program. Well, it's that ominous sound you hear from time to time on TV. It's a signal of something foul, a warning that someone has gone too far, said something that's out of bounds. It is that infamous bleep that we hear all the time. Cursing on TV is our topic today. You know, it still gets bleeped occasionally, but nowhere near as often as it used to. Of course, don't tell actress Sally Field that. She got cut off in the middle of her speech on the National Emmy Awards just the other night. She said something that the censors didn't like.
Let's face it, if the mothers ruled the world, there would be no...
That's the way the program looked as it was airing. What Sally Field actually said was the GD word, and the censors didn't like that. But apparently the censors have gotten a lot more comfortable with words that were once banned and deemed taboo. You can take, for example, the word ass. I said it. In fact, everybody's saying it on TV and especially on the radio if you've been listening. So we're going to talk about swearing on the air these days. What's acceptable, what's not, what's downright offensive. And we'll try not to swear too much ourselves as we talk about this. But first, let's turn back the clock. Because 35 years ago, comedian George Carlin was actually arrested for saying certain words on stage. My, have things changed. Here's correspondent Brooke Anderson with a look back at the evolution of cursing on TV.
Comedian George Carlin's 7 dirty words you can't say on television immediately became a show business legend.
Now that was the original list.
A word for excretion, for urination, for having sex, for breasts, and 3 words still so radioactive we can't even describe them. In 1972, that unforgettable bit of stand-up stunned a Milwaukee audience, which included some children.
I heard all this foul, profane language. It really shocked me, and I'm thinking, here my 7-year-old son is in the audience.
Carlin was immediately arrested for disorderly conduct.
I didn't know there were, but it wouldn't have changed anything I did if I had known there were children in the audience. In fact, I think children need to hear those words the most because as yet they don't have the hang-ups. It's adults who are locked into certain, thought patterns.
An unapologetic Carlin was released and the charges were dismissed. But then a New York radio station aired Carlin's follow-up act, Filthy Words.
There was a complaint by a man that was supposedly driving with his 12-year-old son in the car when these words came pouring out over the radio.
That complaint got to the Supreme Court, which supported FCC regulation of profanity on the public airways. And it established which words were off limits.
I wanted a list, because nobody gives you a list.
There, for the first time, you had kind of a quantification of what is obscene. That was something you could really put your finger on. It's all there. The nastiest words are all right there.
That was then. This is now. A few words on the list remain explosive and rarely used, but others are no longer taboo and frequently used on that 5-letter word, cable.
Get the out.
HBO's Deadwood, original episodes of The Sopranos,
You want to be wearing this poked on your head?
and Sex and the City are rife with racy language.
I bet you have a beautiful dear.
In one episode, Comedy Central's South Park used the S word 162 times.
I said on television.
On cable TV, the subscription service not policed by the FCC the way broadcast is. But barriers are also breaking down on broadcast TV.
I'm going to kick your
Damn.
language.
Sorry.
Fox's Family Guy even made fun of the FCC's regulations.
They will make you take a tinkle when you want to take a piss.
We actually log every instance of profanity on broadcast, so we have the data. Profanity has increased 100% over a 6-year period.
Timothy Winter of the Parents Television Council says his group brings bad language to the FCC's attention.
We've seen the F word used on live awards shows.
So that was Cher at the 2002 Billboard Music Awards, while U2's Bono used the same F word at the 2003 Golden Globes.
That's really
The FCC ruled the incidents were indecent, but an appeals court recently overturned that decision, possibly weakening government power over language on the airwaves.
Filthy, foul.
35 years after the 7 dirty words you can't say on television, the debate George Carlin triggered is far from over. Brooke Anderson, New York.
George Carlin, 1972. Joining me now to talk more about this is Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, professor of urban education and American studies at Temple University. Dr. Hill, good to see you again.
Always good to see you too, Art.
What about it? Have the boundaries of what's obscene for TV shifted dramatically?
Absolutely, the boundaries have changed. Certainly, you can say more. We're more inclusive in terms of the types of explosive and racy language we can use. But also, there's a cultural shift in the sense that certain terms that we found offensive no longer offend us. So it's not that we allow more offensive language only, but it's also we've changed what counts as offensive.
Have we become desensitized then? Because again, if you take the case of George Carlin, people were just, incensed by all of that. Now we hear regular words like ass, that was said in that report, on broadcast TV, on the radio,
exactly.
On a daily basis.
Exactly. You can say ass. I've never said ass on TV. I'm saying ass now.
How does it feel?
It feels great. I feel very liberated, Art. But this idea that we can say these words means exactly that we're not as prudish and we're not as narrow-minded in our thinking and our speech as we were before. I think that's a good thing. The only thing that gets tricky is when we hear words like the B word, used on national television, usually by women, but used on national television, both cable and regular TV. When we hear that, we become desensitized to words that degrade and dehumanize. That can be dangerous, and that sets us on a slippery slope.
Let's talk about cable and regular TV, because I think that sometimes it becomes a little bit confusing for viewers, or I would dare to say that they don't so much care. This is a cable program we're on right now, but if it was a broadcast program, if you have a remote control in your hand, you're just changing the dials. You don't distinguish what's cable versus what's broadcast.
Exactly.
And so when you hear these words across the board, I think people tend to understand that the really offensive words where, no holds barred, that is on pay cable programming, like HBO and Showtime and the like, where you are actually paying to hear this, correct?
That's exactly right. But what happens is because we're in a global marketplace and everybody's competing with one another for viewers, if The Sopranos have the F word and, now all of a sudden, or shows like that have the F word or other racy language, then the network wants to compete for those viewers. So they're going to try and push the boundaries of their language as well. So even though the paid subscribed cable networks have, greater leeway in terms of what they can say, what we're finding is that the networks want to follow their lead, and they're doing so. That's why you see shows like NYPD Blue 10 years ago that not only had racy language, but actual images, full frontal nudity, all of these other things. It's getting worse and worse.
Well, we've been blamed. When I say we, I'm speaking of us in the media.
Yeah.
We've been blamed for having a terrible influence on the younger generation, the children out there who are watching these programs. What do you say about that?
I think that's true. I mean, I think there is a huge impact on young people, through television, through radio, through music, and so forth. I don't want to ignore that. But the challenge here is also to not place the blame squarely on the hands of the media. In fact, I don't expect anything else from the media. The media's job is to make money. The question here is, where can community members, where can parents, where can other leaders step in, intervene in these young people's lives so that they can explain this language, so that they can talk about this, and so that they can set them on the correct path.
And how are we as Americans in this regard? Because in Europe, what's seen on TV and what's seen daily is far more outstretching than where it is here in America, although we're starting to stretch our boundaries here, but the European countries have been there already for a long time.
Absolutely, and I think you're hitting the nail right on the head. We always create these moral panics. Every generation we worry that our morals are going down the toilet, that the television or the media or the juke joint, whatever it is sending us on the road to hell. And once we have that moral panic, we put more attention to this stuff, and we make it more taboo than it is, and that actually attracts people to it. But if we were to sort of throw our hands up just a little bit more, not completely, but just a little bit more, and say, a little racy language, a little racy speech, a few racy images, if we were to allow those things on television and not make it such a big moral panic, I think we'd be much better off.
Well, Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, I always enjoy having you on the program.
Always
enjoy your insights on these matters, and not that I'm trying to be a bad influence on you, but we were glad we were able to liberate you just a little bit in your use of the ASS.
I'm going to get a call from my mom, and I'm blaming you, Art.
They all blame me, so you'll be right in good company there.
Cool.
Hey, thanks again.
My pleasure.
By the way, there's one other thing. You always have the power of the remote control to change the dial. But don't change it right now, because we've got a lot more still to come for you, okay? Stick with me. Well, what do you think about this? Has the FCC gotten out of hand and letting more and more swearing and adult content get by on TV, on the radio? Do you think that more should be done to try and curb that?